Hey English 4, let's talk Act 4 in Macbeth. So when we ended Act 3, we saw that Macbeth was planning on meeting the witches, so that way he could talk to them, get a little bit of clarification that was going on. But we also know that the witches were planning on tricking Macbeth and instilling him with a sense of false confidence. So let's take a look at what is arguably the most famous scene from Macbeth, and I'll go over the most important parts of it. The beginning of the scene opens with the witches and Hecate, who are all hanging around, and they're beginning to cast this spell to bring Macbeth there. So the most famous line in Macbeth is the double, double, toil and trouble, fire, burn, and cauldron bubble. It's actually really fun to try and get everybody to say out loud in class at the same time. Then we get into the different things that the witches throw into this cauldron in order to create the spell. There has actually been a little bit of controversy on this, which is wild. I can't imagine that there's controversy over Macbeth 500-600 years later, but people have been saying that the ingredients such as eye of newt and toe of frog and wool of bat and adder's fork and blindworm sting, that those were actually common colloquial names for different types of herbs, and they were really just making a soup. That's nonsense. So if you see that out there on social media or anything, it's not true. And I can say that with quite a bit of certainty from studying Macbeth and Shakespeare's work. The things that they are making are really, really gross. And if you look kind of closely in that part from the Third Witch, we get some really racist stuff in there too. One of my favorites is the finger of birth strangled babe ditch delivered by a drab. They're saying that it's a finger from a dead baby that a hooker gave birth to in a ditch. So it's pretty gross, and they definitely put some horrifying ingredients in this cauldron. Now, the other part that is incredibly famous is by the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. First of all, they're implying that Macbeth is truly wicked. And also, what's with the witches and thumbs? Because the first witch takes the thumb of a pilot. I am really confused about that. I'll keep doing more research on it, see what we can get. When Macbeth does actually talk to the witches, he asks them to give him some answers. And they're like, okay, cool, so we will. You speak, demand, and we'll answer. In order to call up the apparitions, the different ghosts or spirits that will give Macbeth his answers, they pour in a pig's blood, but only the pig that has eaten all 9 of her offspring. That's pretty horrifying. And sweat from the brow of a murderer, and that they're going to throw in the flame to bring up these images. These are the parts that you need to have in your scene guides because these are such short. The Act 4 only has 3 scenes. I will be grading them a little bit more difficultly, I guess, or harshly. Make sure that you have each of the apparitions and what they prophesize. So the first apparition is an armed head, okay? It's not a head with an arm hanging off of it. What it means is a head that has armor on it, like an armored helmet, okay? So the first apparition, which is the head with armor on it, is Beware Macduff, beware the Thane of Fife. So first apparition says Beware Macduff. Second apparition is a bloody child, which is horrifying to think about regardless. The second apparition says, be bloody, bold, and resolute, laugh to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. Now that sounds fantastic, okay? That sounds really great. So second apparition is a bloody child who says that none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. Now, that should put him in the clear, right? Every human being, especially during medieval Scotland, was born of a woman. So it seems like he's got a pretty good thing going on here. The third apparition is a child with a crown on his head who is holding a whole tree in his hand. So the third apparition is a child with a crown holding a tree in his hand. And this particular child's prophecy is that Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Birnam Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. So what he's saying is that Macbeth won't be defeated until the entirety of the woods behind his house go all the way, they climb up Dunsinane Hill. That's when he can be defeated. So that sounds pretty great. He's got a pretty good prophecy going here, that no one born of a woman can hurt him, that he has to go all, that he he will not be vanquished until the entire woods travels all the way up Dunsinane Hill, which forests move, they grow, they spread out, but it takes centuries in order for trees and an entire forest to move up from a lower place to a high hill. So Macbeth is sitting pretty nice on all of these prophecies. The big problem with all these prophecies is that we as the audience know that the witches are trying to fool him, that they're telling him again these half-truths that will have some kind of catch to them and will catch Macbeth off guard. Now Macbeth's really stoked to hear all of this. Okay, he's like, well, that'll never happen. Who can impress the forest? Bid the tree unfix his earthbound root. He's like, this is great. Okay, good. So I will be fine. Nothing is going to happen to me. And so the witches have really instilled within him this false sense of confidence. So now he feels like nothing can hurt him. And that is going to be part of his downfall. Obviously, another thing that Macbeth is concerned about is how Banquo's children will take over the throne that he has given up his immortal soul to have. So he asked them, he's like, so tell me about Banquo, what's going to happen? So the last apparition that the witches give him is a show of 8 kings. And the last has a mirror in his hand followed by Banquo. So what this is he's showing that there is a line, an unbroken line of kings that come from Banquo that will eventually, some I see that twofold balls and treble scepters carry. What that's implying is that it is the unification of the United Kingdom. So it's Scotland, England, Ireland. So that's where we get that treble scepters. And the twofold balls and treble scepters, if you're having a problem trying to picture that, think about Frozen and think about what Elsa is trying to pick up at the beginning of the first Frozen movie, okay? They are signs of royalty and of the monarchy for that particular region. And now he sees it's true. The blood-boltered Banquo smiles upon me and points at them for his. So he killed Banquo. He killed his best friend for no reason. That's brutal. That's heavy, man. To finish up this scene, we have Lennox showing up to talk to Macbeth and tell him that Macduff has fled to England. Now, we do know that Malcolm is already in England and he is trying to raise an army. So he's raising an army to take against Macbeth in order to take back the rightful throne and put himself, Duncan's son, as the king of Scotland. So now, here's Macbeth's plan to deal with Macduff. The castle of Macduff I will surprise, seize upon Fife, give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. No boasting like a fool, this deed I'll do before this purpose cool. So he's going to go and send someone to kill Macduff's entire family. His wife, his children, the dog, and even break the fish tank on the way out, okay? So all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. Now this part that says, this deed I'll do before this purpose cool, this is again another instance where he is acting without thought, that he is just acting without that moment to reflect on what's going on. And Shakespeare's already warned us about this type of behavior previously. So the next scene is going to be with Macduff's family in Fife. So in your scene guides, you want to make sure that you list each of the apparitions, what they look like, and what they are prophesying. You also want to make sure that you have written down what the last apparition shows them, and that is Banquo's unbroken line, which does go all the way to King James, who is the person for whom Shakespeare wrote this particular play. Any types of symbols are going to be these prophecies. You can also talk about the cauldron, and you can talk about some of the really horrifying things that the witches throw in there. Underneath themes, you can also talk about this idea of action versus thought. I think that's a really good one. And how Macbeth is just, He's become a bloody murderer, and he can't get out of this mindset.